What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, the Basement Troll. We're back in the basement here tonight. I don't know what he's asking for, but back in the basement will be the last basement show for a while, hopefully. We have a 10-game slate tonight. Not exactly the who's who of games. Don't really like this slate, but we are going to break it down. We got some good GPPs here tonight. Last night is what we like to call in the business a tax write-off. It was a slate that we played. But tonight we hit the nuts, and joining me to break it down, Slim Cliffy. What's going on?
Yeah, not a whole lot. 10 games on the board tonight. It's a very interesting slate because there are a couple chalky spots. Obviously, last night didn't go so well. I was on Nashville. I was because yesterday on the show we talked a lot about Florida. I was considering playing Florida, but the thing was, even if I got to Florida, I wasn't playing Mac Tkachuk. Mac Tkachuk had a 3-point game, so that's the way that goes. Like you said, you can't hit the nuts if you don't play. We are back for tonight's 10-game slate. Some teams are on back-to-backs. Phillies back-to-back. The Kings are back-to-back. John Klingberg, speaking of back, he's back in an NHL lineup. He's in for Edmonton today. So we'll go game by game and break these down, go over the chalk, whether it's good, whether it's bad. Lots of interesting spots here tonight.
Yeah. Lots of low totals here tonight. There's not really many totals in the mid-range. It's really, really high threes or low twos. So we will break it down, but let's get into the slate before we do. My beard is all over the place tonight. It is a mess. Let's get into this slate. Just wanted to say thank you for hanging out with us on this Thursday afternoon. I still don't know what he wants. Let's give him a can of soup. And if you do want to go premium, you can click the link in the chat. Use promo code Stochastic15. That'll give you 15% off your first week or month subscription of any subscription. First game of the night, we have the Winnipeg Jets with a 2.9 total. Heading into Boston, the Bruins have a 2.6. Boston going Pastrnak, Zacha, Geeky, Marchand, Lindholm, Coyle. They're moving Lindholm up because the second line matchups are tough, they said. Okay. Winnipeg going Connor, Sheffield, Velarde, Ehlers, Perfidi, Nemestikov. There really isn't any ownership on this game besides the Boston top line coming in at 4.2% projected at 17.9. Playing Winnipeg's not a great matchup. Boston has a 2.6 home total. If you happen to get to Boston 1 in MME, I think that is perfectly fine. I don't think I'm running out to play them here in single entry. Playing Pastrnak as a one-off is always in play. That's something that I would consider in single entry. I don't think I'll get there. I don't like stacking against Connor Hellebuck. But, in MME, Boston 1's fine. Don't really have too much interest in Boston 2. I will say you do get 2 of the 3 on the top power play. They're 13,200, and they do, Winnipeg's penalty kill isn't the best, but Boston's power play sucks, and Charlie McAvoy is back on the top unit. And the power play with him has been so bad. So I'm pretty much out on Boston and single entry and MME. The first line's fine. My interest is actually on the Winnipeg side. That Winnipeg top line coming in at 0.7%. I know they're expensive at $21,000, but no one's playing them. They have a 2.9 road total. Boston's been better defensively, but their goaltending still has been bad. So at 0.7%, I do have some interest there. It's more of an MME thing since they're the most expensive on the night, and I do like some mid-range lines, but it would be both top lines for me, but it's mostly MME.
Yeah. Lest we forget, just a couple days ago that the Buffalo Sabres hung 7 goals on Boston, including a pair of hat tricks. If Buffalo can do it, Winnipeg can certainly do it. Now, Joonas Korpisalo's in net. He's had a better season than Jeremy Swayman. Not much better, but a better season nonetheless. Boston's still not a great defensive team. Getting Charlie McAvoy back will obviously help, considering their options. Brandon Carlo back in the lineup also helps as well. So I don't mind Winnipeg here. it's kind of like the same thing that we talked about with Florida last night. It's the fact that this is a perfectly correlated top line that is getting absolutely no ownership. And whether Korpisalo's been better than Swayman or not is kind of irrelevant because the Boston penalty kill overall is just bad, right? Like it has just been bad basically from the jump of the season and has not really improved. Boston over the last 4 weeks, giving up the 4th most power play goals against per game on the season, the 3rd most power play goals against per game. And Winnipeg has the best power play in the league and has all season. So I get wanting to play Winnipeg. If I was 20 maxing, I would probably have one. Certainly if you're 150, I would probably have a couple, 2 or 3 or whatever. I probably won't pay up 21K for a line on the road on a 10-game slate, almost regardless of the matchup. But I do think that this is a pretty good power play matchup for that Winnipeg top line. Well, the one concern I really have for Winnipeg is ice time. Like those guys have been getting a little bit of like Gabriel Velarde's been around 15, 16 minutes the last handful of games, like the last 5 games. Scheifele and Connor at the high end, like closer to 20, maybe even 19. Like they're not getting a ton of ice time. So that's why I think it's more like you said, MME for me. But I do think Winnipeg one, if you're playing a bunch of lineups, should really be considered. This is a really good power play matchup for them. I have no interest in Boston. David Pastrnak, I'll always say is a fine one-off, but Winnipeg's top 2 pairs are pretty good. Connor Hellebuyck's in net. Boston power play is atrocious, so they can't even take advantage of the one Winnipeg weakness, which is their penalty kill. So I Pastrnak went off or something, but I'm out on Boston.
Yep. A lot of candidates for this game sucks, but there is one that I have circled. Didn't want to use it right away. Let's get into the next game. Minnesota Wild with a 2.9 total heading into Montreal. The Canadiens have a 3.1. Minnesota going Boldy, Zuccarello, Eriksson, Ek, Rossi, Hartman, Foligno. Montreal going Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Line, Doc, Newhook, Linus, Toom. Harvey Pinard just slides in on that 4th line. Montreal getting a 3.1 total is interesting. I mean, Minnesota is back-to-back on the road. Yeah, they beat Toronto last night with Gustafsson in net. It's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury tonight. One of the highest top 2 stack percentages on the night is Minnesota 1. 21.2% top 2 stack, 15.6% projected ownership. Now, it is a good 5-on-5 matchup. It is a good power play matchup. This line hasn't been good so far, the 3 of them together. I wouldn't be shocked if they fell behind to see Rossi and Eriksson flip, but I don't know. It is a good power play matchup, so from that standpoint, I am fine with Minnesota 1. I don't particularly love them at 15.6% projected. Like, I want to see, like, really good 5-on-5 numbers, even in a really good 5-on-5 matchup. So, like, from the power play perspective, I think, they're fine. Whether I get there in single entry is to be determined. They're fully correlated. They play heavy minutes. So the reasoning is there. It's just a matter of can you stomach putting them in at 16%. The second line, I'll throw into a basket for, if you're doing something really expensive like Edmonton power play stack or something like that, Carolina, something like that. Rossi's on the top power play unit. That line in a small sample has been pretty good. They're 11,100. They'd be a filler that I would use if I was going super expensive. The Montreal side is pretty interesting to me as well. 10% on the top line is a little steep for me at 16K with a 6.7% top 2 stack, especially with the defensive pairs. Now, it is Marc-Andre Fleury in that. He's had a decent season, about league average save percentage. He's no Gustafsson, though, and this is a good power play matchup. So that automatically, when I'm talking about power play for Montreal, I'm automatically going to gravitate toward Patrick Laine here. So I'm going to be a broken record. It's going to be Laine, add in Hudson, add in Suzuki, Laine, Hudson, Caulfield, Laine, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, something like that. I do some sort of power play stack revolving around Laine. Laine one-off is completely fine here. I don't know if I'm going to get to the top line at 10% in a tough 5-on-5 matchup. Marc-Andre Fleury in net does make it more appealing, but there are other lines in that range, like the 15 to 17K range, that are getting less ownership and has a better 5-on-5 matchup.
Yeah, I'll start on the Minnesota side. I think, there is a lot of ownership on the Wild here tonight. Top line projected ownership is over 15%. I know it's a good matchup for them. It's still a lot for a line that's playing back-to-back on the road on a 10-game slate that features 20 teams. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a lot of ownership. They did play a ton of minutes last night. Like, if they play those minutes again, it's a lot of minutes for under 20K with a perfectly correlated line. So that's where I kind of get it. Also, should mention Caden Gooley out for Montreal. He got hurt the other night. Said it's a lacerated quad muscle. That doesn't sound good. He's probably their best defensive defenseman. Now, that means more minutes for guys like Mike Matheson, Lane Hudson, David Savard. They all have their individual strengths. None of them are being really good defensively. So, this is a pretty good matchup for Minnesota, especially considering all the penalties that Montreal takes. And I said it yesterday on the show that Minnesota's penalty kill or power play, has been better without Kirill Kaprizov in the lineup. Sure enough, last night they get one power play and they go 1 for 1. I think they scored like 10 seconds in or something like that.
It's really fast, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a pretty good power play spot for them. Like, if you don't mind all the ownership, I think going to Minnesota 1's fine. I'm not worried about 5-on-5 matchups. It's a good power play matchup for them. They're going to play a ton of minutes. If you look at top 2 stacks, they're leading the board by top 2 stack probability here tonight. So kind of tells you about the spot that Minnesota's in. I do like Minnesota 1 here. I'm not as interested in their depth. I think I want the power play guys just because Montreal does take so many penalties. The penalty kill is okay. It's fine. But they take so many penalty kills that it negates any improvements they've made on the penalty kill over the season. And again, missing goalie's not going to help. So I really do like Minnesota 1 here. On the Montreal side, here's the interesting thing. Over the last 2.5 seasons, the worst goalie, you can make a case that Marc-Andre Fleury has been the worst goalie in the NHL when his team's shorthanded. He's dead last by goals saved above expected while shorthanded over the last 2.5 seasons. And I think he's second to last by overall save percentage. The only guy that's worse is Dan Vladar. So if there's 1 week, we talk about how bad the Minnesota penalty kill is. Well, Marc-Andre Fleury is a big part of that. So I get wanting to play Montreal 1. They're coming in a little bit overowned, but it is a good power play spot for them. Minnesota does have their full defensive complement back, though. That kind of worries me. I do really like the idea of a line A one-off just because it is such a good power play spot. I'm not so much interested in full stacking Montreal, but I think a one-off Suzuki is fine. He's playing like 20, 21 minutes, and he'll obviously get power play time. A one-off line A, obviously perfectly fine as well. Full stacking, like with the amount of ownership that's coming in on them, it's okay. I'm not going to say don't play Montreal because they're going to be 10% owned. I just think personally I'd be more interested in one-offs than full stacking.
Concur. Washington Capitals with a 2.7 total. Heading into Ottawa, the Sens have a 2.7 total. So this game is rather interesting because Washington mercifully moved McMichael down to the second line, moved Wilson up to the top line. Now, these line combinations still aren't great. Ottawa's a pretty good defensive team. Now, it is Anton Forsberg in net, and he hasn't been great. Like, Merilainen obviously has been better. Linus Ullmark, when he comes back, is their best goalie. I don't like. I want to say I don't mind Ovechkin, Strome, Wilson because they're fully correlated at 16.8 at 2.6% projected ownership. But this isn't a good 5-on-5 matchup. Strome and Ovechkin have played terribly this season. I will say in MME they're fine because they're fully correlated. But I really don't have a ton of interest in Washington. On the Ottawa side, these new lines, like they haven't been like all their samples aren't really great. And every time I think about playing Ottawa, it's like I hear Cliffy going, yeah, they're lowest in the league in high danger passes. Now, it might not be Logan Thompson here tonight. It might be Charlie Lindgren, and that's a pretty steep drop-off. Like, Logan Thompson's having one of the most ridiculous seasons ever in the NHL. So, like, from that standpoint, maybe I would have some interest in Stützle, Tkachuk, Giroux at 17-4 at 3.4% projected. But, you know, it wouldn't be in single entry. From an MME perspective, it'd be both top lines, and that's about it.
Yeah, generally speaking, I don't have a ton of interest in this game. A lot will come down to the goaltending. Like Anton Forsberg has just not been good, so that's a plus for Washington. If it's Lindgren for the Caps in net, then I'd have a little bit of interest in Ottawa. If it's Thompson, not so much. I was telling Josh this morning, since December 1st, Washington goaltenders are responsible for it's like 32.7 goals saved above expected in 26 games played. It's a mark that's 40% better than the best goaltending season we have seen since 2007, which is arguably Ilya Sorokin a couple of years ago. So, like, these guys are just, like, playing out of their minds doesn't even suffice to describe it. So, eventually that's got to crash. Is it going to happen against an Ottawa team that has the second lowest shooting percentage at 5-on-5 this season? I don't know. And the power play had gone cold as well. That's why they've changed it up and put Claude Giroux on the top line. I have no interest in that Washington top line. Like, they're fine because they are perfectly correlated 16,800 with low ownership. But I'm going to be honest, there are other lines coming in at around like 5-6% or less in that same price range that are also perfectly correlated with a decent top two stack percentage that I'd rather play here. So I think for me, my interest on the Caps would be the second line as a filler. McMichael and Protas, 2.6 expected goals for, 1.4 against per 60 in their time together. Dubois having a really good season. Like I said, they're priced as a filler. So if you're playing a line like Minnesota or, we'll get to Vegas or, we'll get to the Islanders or Carolina. If you're playing one of those lines, I think Washington 2 is perfectly fine because it's not really a great power play matchup for them anyway. But that's about it. And then honestly, I don't have a ton of interest in the Caps. The reason I have interest in the Caps is because Forsberg's starting, and I always hate playing a line just because of a goaltender. Like, usually I'll have other reasons to play them. Here it's pretty much just because of the goaltender. So that makes me a little bit nervous. On the Ottawa side, that top line is perfectly correlated. Speaking of perfectly correlated top lines, and they're going to go out against Strome and Ovechkin. Strome and Ovechkin without Protas this season, 160 minutes. 66 shot attempts against, 3.4 expected goals against per 60 minutes. They're getting like 960 goaltending behind them. Again, the Caps goaltenders have been playing out of their mind. It's got to regress a bit at some point. I would rather play the Ottawa top line than the Washington top line here. Generally speaking, I don't have a lot of interest in this game, but for me, I would go Ottawa 1, Washington 2, and then probably nothing else.
LA Kings with a 2.8 total heading into Tampa Bay. The Lightning have a 3.2. Tampa going Kucherov, Point, Gensel. Hagel, Cirelli, Geeky. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Paul, guy. LA back-to-back on the road here. They're going Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte, Fiala, LaFerriere, Byfield, and then Fogle to know more. Now, Andrei Vasilevsky is a game-time decision. He is still sick. If he can't go, Jonas Johansson's hurt. So it would be the AHL guy that is escaping my brain.
Matt Tompkins.
And if you can't beat out Jonas Johansson for the backup gig, what does that say about you? Now, on the Tampa side, Kucherov, Point, Gensel, 19% top two stack, 1.7% projected ownership. Now, normally at 25,400, I wouldn't give it much thought and be like, that's a fade. But it is big save Dave Riddick in net for the Kings here tonight. I don't particularly love him. So like I still don't want to spend 25,400, but they're going to avoid, the top pairs for the Kings. I think I'd be more likely to go to a Kucherov one-off than full stacking Tampa 1. Tampa 2 is interesting. Hagel, Cirelli, Geeky at 15.5, but they're going to run into, that top line and top defensive pair, the Gavrikov pairing for the Kings, and that they have been excellent defensively. They've arguably been the best pair defensively in the league. So I don't have a ton of interest in Tampa depth. It would be Tampa 1, but I don't really want to spend over 25,000 on this slate. I think in MME, you have, get over the field of 1.7%. If that's something you're interested in. I am interested in a Kucherov one-off, and that's really about it. On the Kings side, it would be Fiala, Laferriere, or Byfield because they're going to see that Kucherov matchup. And that Kucherov line has been leaky. They broke them up this season because of how bad defensively they were. So Fiala, Laferriere, or Byfield for me at 13,600. They put Laferriere back on the top power play unit, which was super necessary. We'll have to see if Doughty's in. It could they want to see how he feels. Brant Clark could be back in, but it would be LA 2 for me, Tampa 1 in MME.
Yeah, I mean, again, every time Tampa's on the slate, it's going to be the same thing as long as they're priced where they are. It's like if you want to spend over half your salary on Tampa Bay, like go ahead. Kucherov's, I think Kucherov over the last 5 games is averaging 25 minutes a game. It's absolutely preposterous. Now, Point and Gensel are under 20 minutes a game in that stretch, so they're not getting anywhere near the ice time he is. But, they're still really good offensively. It is Dave Riddick and net for the Kings. So if you want to spend over half your salary, they do have a high top 2 stack, then do it. I never do. So that's just kind of the way that goes. Tampa 2, I think, is certainly in play. I think the reason they're in play is because I want to attack the Kings at 5-on-5. They're second and third pairs. But Tampa 2 is probably going to see a lot of the Gavrikov-Anderson pairing. I'm probably just out on Tampa here. Somebody wants to play them. It's like, go ahead. There's not that much ownership on them. The second line's under 1%. The top line's under 2%. Not a ton of ownership, and they could fill the net against anybody. Like single entry, if I'm going to pay up, I do think there are at least 2 other spots that I would rather look at that we'll get to a little bit later. So I think my interest in this game is honestly from the Kings side. I agree with you on Fiala, Laferriere, just Fiala and Laferriere together this season, 69 shot attempts, 3.4 expected goals per 60 minutes. They're actually only league average by 5-on-5 goal scoring, despite shooting under 8%. So if those guys can ever start finishing, at least anywhere as close to league average, or God forbid, anywhere above league average, they would really start filling the net. And Laferriere got moved back to the top power play unit. Now the Kings don't have a good power play, generally speaking. Tampa Bay does have a good penalty kill, generally speaking. But getting 2 other 3 guys on that top power play unit for 13,600, where Byfield will probably play 18, 19 minutes, Fiala close to 20, Laferriere 17. Like, they're going to get good ice time. So for me, I think it's Fiala, Laferriere, Byfield that I like best in this game. Other than that, like I said, if you want to spend over half your salary on Tampa, then do it. I don't. So there we go.
Chicago Blackhawks with a 2.1 total heading into Carolina. The Hurricanes have a 3.9. Sebastian Aho was not at practice this morning. He is sick. He is a game-time decision. They practiced with Roslovic at the top line center. That kind of leads me to believe that they're expecting Aho to play. If he's out, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to run a top line center of Jack Roslovic.
I mean, if he's out, maybe they do. Like, it is Chicago. Like, they should be like this is one of those games where they could put all their defensemen up front and their top 2 lines on defense and probably still win. So
that's valid. If Aho is in, they're priced at 19,600. And like, they're fine because it's a really good 5-on-5 matchup. The problem is, and Cliffy alluded to it in the Discord this morning, is Rantanen's price, right? He's like 8,500 or something like that, 8,300. And
he's 8,500, which is only $300 less than David Pastrnak.
Yeah, and as Cliffy mentioned in the Discord, he's played under 20 minutes his first 2 games for Carolina. He hasn't. What was the stat? He hasn't played back-to-back.
He played under 19 minutes in his first 2 games with Carolina, and it's the first time since like the second and third game of last season that he played back-to-back games with under 19 minutes. It was like a stretch of like 124 games.
Yeah, so like I get the play because it's a really, really good power play matchup. But if you look down the slate, right, Edmonton also has a 3.9 total. They're in a very good power play spot. Vegas has a 3.8 total. They're in a very good 5-on-5 and power play spot. Carolina's only in a good 5-on-5 spot. So they're fine at 19-6, but realistically, you would want them like 17-8 to like 18-8, something like that, especially if Rantanen's only going to play 19 minutes. So like they're fine, but they're more of an MME play for me because of the price. You want to go to Kotkaniemi, Hall, Svechnikov, like that's fine. Like Hall actually looks good with Carolina. No shock getting out of Chicago has been good for his career. Playing with Svechnikov, outside of playing with Connor Bedard, Svechnikov is probably the best player he's played with in the past couple seasons. So for that instance at 13-5, I think it's fine. Obviously, the stall line is in play at home. They're going to see that Bedard, Bertuzzi, Nazar matchup, and they are absolute cheeks defensively. So Aho in or out, Jarvis, Stahl, Martinook is still my favorite line on the team, but I think there's 3 playable lines depending on your price tolerance. On the Blackhawks side, good luck. I'm out.
Yeah, you're right about Rantanen. Like we said it on the last show, he's still priced as if he's playing 22, 23 minutes a night, skating next to Nathan McKinnon at all strengths, as opposed to skating 19 minutes a night, skating next to Sebastian Aho. Now, Aho is a very good player. He's an all-star. He is not Nathan McKinnon, who is a top 3 player in the league. And it's a cutoff of a lot of minutes. Until that price comes down on Rantanen, like I'm just not going to be playing him. You should honestly be about $2,000 cheaper. And the one instance where I probably would play Rantanen at this price is where there's very low ownership. And there is positive leverage, 9% ownership, 13% top 2 stack for Carolina 1. So there is positive leverage, but it's not low ownership. And there is another spot that we'll get to, honestly, in the next game that I think I would rather play here tonight in that price range at lower ownership. Probably going to get more minutes from them as well. Now, listen, this is still Chicago. They do have some good games once in a while. I heard Soderblom just had one the other game against Tampa Bay. This is still a pretty bad team. So I understand playing Carolina 1. It's just not for me here tonight. Not until I see Rantanen's price come down. He's just too expensive where he is. For that reason, if you want to play Svechnikov, Hall, Kotkaniemi, like no issue with that. But I think I would just go back to Jarvis, Stahl, Martinook. Big reason for that is because they are going to get that Bedard line in the matchup. And that Bedard line is abysmal defensively. Absolutely atrocious. And, Stahl, Martinook played 15, 16 minutes. Jarvis, he might play a little less with Rantanen now, but it'll still be around 18 minutes. They're priced as a filler, $12,700. For that line since Christmas, 4 expected goals per 60 minutes, 69 shot attempts per 60 minutes. I really do like that Stahl, Jarvis, Martinook as a filler here. If you do want to fit in like a Minnesota that we talked about earlier, or a line that we'll talk about in the next game, something like that. So Stahl, Jarvis, Martinook for me, nothing from the Chicago side.
I mean, we'll talk about defensemen at the end. You could have a defenseman, but like from their skaters right now, absolutely not. New York Islanders with a 2.8 total heading into Philadelphia. The Flyers have a 2.7. Flyers played last night. So it's going to be Ivan Fedotov in net for the Flyers. He is not a serious goalie. Congrats to him to making the NHL, but he is an AHL goalie. Owen Tippett also got hurt. No idea what the lineup is going to be. I don't particularly love the Flyers in this matchup anyway. So like a one-off Konechny is probably about it. A one-off Tyson Forrester, something like that. But realistically, I'm probably out on the Flyers. On the Islanders side, normally I'm just off the Islanders and completely because they're always chalk and it's unfoundedly bad chalk. But at 18,800 here tonight, they have an 8.1% top two stack, 3.1% projected ownership. Flyers are back-to-back. They have Fedotov in net. That line has been very, very good. Now, they are a little bit expensive, which kind of sucks, but like this is a very, very good matchup because the goalies are terrible. So I am kind of in on Horvat Barzal-Lee here. Outside of that, I don't have much interest in this game. I don't know if I'm going to get to the Islanders top line in single entry, but unlike other slates where I'm automatically out, they're at least in consideration for me.
Yeah. With Tippett injured, obviously we don't know what that lineup is going to look like. I think it seems reasonable to assume that Brink, Cates, and Forrester are going to stay together. It's basically the one line that's been together for like a couple months now. Their play is kind of dipped lately. I was looking since January 1st, 60 shot attempts, 3.1 expected goals against per 60, 3.3 actual goals against per 60. Like not only are they giving up goals, but there's a lot of shots and a lot of quality against them to back that up. So it's not like they're playing well and the goaltending suffering. They're not playing well. So like kind of, I mean, one-off Cates is fine, but even like, Tyson Forrester has 20 shots in his last 15 games. You know what I mean? Like over a full season, that's what, like 105 shots, 108 shots, something like that. Like it's just not doing a whole lot. So even Konechny, I was looking earlier. Konechny's shot attempt rate at 5-on-5 this season is down 35% from the last 2 years. Now, we may not have noticed it because through the first half of the season, the first 41 games, he was shooting 19%. That helps. When he's not shooting 19%, he's not scoring very many goals. And then at that point, you're just relying on a lot of assists. It's kind of like we talk about with Nathan McKinnon. Nathan McKinnon starts shooting less and piling up a few more assists. Travis Konechny's kind of doing the same thing, only he doesn't play 23 minutes a game, and his power play is absolutely terrible. So, I don't know, man. I just really don't have a lot of interest in the Flyers overall. If you want to play that Brink line because you're playing like Tampa or something like that, like, okay. But for me, my interest is on the Islander side. Like I said, that Cates line is getting run over in the month of January, basically since Christmas. They're starting Ivan Fedotov in net. The defense has been okay, better, but not elite, especially on the penalty kill. Not that the Islanders have a good power play, but that Islanders top line is perfectly correlated at 5-on-5 and on the power play. 3% ownership at 18,800. Lee, Barzal, and Horvat, 85 minutes together this season, 84 shot attempts, 3.1 expected goals, 4.8 actual goals per 60 minutes. Lee plays like 18 minutes, give or take. Barzal and Horvat around 20. Horvat over 3 shots per game over his last 20 games. At 18,800, they're in that price range with Carolina that we just talked about, with Minnesota, the highly owned Minnesota we talked about earlier. Like if you want to play a low-owned option under 20K tonight, I think this is the spot. So Islanders 1 is what I like best in this game. Islanders 2 is okay, but I think for me, I want the perfectly correlated top line that plays a lot of minutes. So it's Islanders 1 and nothing for me from the Flyers side.
Yeah, agreed. Anaheim Ducks, they 2.5 total. Heading into Calgary, the Flames have a 3.1. This game's teetering on this game sucks, but we're going to hold off. Kadri, Huberdeau, Peltier, Coleman, Coronado, Backlund, Sharangovich, Pospisil, Kuzmenko. For the Flames, Ducks going Vetrano, Terry Strome, McTavish, Gauthier, Fabry, Zegras, Kaloran, Carlson. Now, Ton of ownership here on the Calgary top two lines. And I hate chalk Calgary. However, Coleman Coronado Backlund is going to see that Vetrano Terry Strome line. That line got absolutely run over by Chandler Stevenson in the last game. So I understand the play. That ownership in single entry is ridiculous. I don't think I'll be doing it. And I'd rather just go play the stall line. But if you are interested in rostering Flames here tonight, like I absolutely get this play. If you get run over by the Stevenson line, you should get contracted to like some island. It's like that shouldn't happen. So like Coleman Coronado Backlund, definitely in play. That ownership sucks, and I'd rather go play the stall line in single entry. But Kadri Huberdeau Peltier at 14.5, 11.3% projected ownership. Like I don't particularly love that. If I'm going to eat the chalk on a Calgary line, it would be Coleman Coronado Backlund. I think you can do like a Sharon Govich Kuzmenko 2-man if you are getting expensive elsewhere. It would be Coleman Coronado Backlund for me. I'm probably not doing it, but I understand the play here. On the Ducks side, this is a pretty tough matchup with Dustin Wolf and net. These lines have been decent defensively. I'm out on the Vetrano Terry Strome line going up against the Coleman line. McTavish, Gauthier, Fabry, Zegras, Killorn, Carlson. I'm going to throw into that basket of fillers if you're getting expensive elsewhere, but I don't particularly love the Ducks here.
Yeah, I'll start on the Calgary side. Like, I get playing Calgary. I don't have, in a nutshell, I don't have an issue playing Calgary, but like Josh said, that is a lot of ownership, 16% on the Coleman line, 11% on the Kadri line. You know, the other thing is like, this is actually a decent spot for both teams. The thing is, like, both teams have a pretty bad power play. Like, the Flames did have a good power play at once upon a time, and then they put Kadri back there on the top unit, and lo and behold, it's bad again. Like, whatever's going on with Kadri on the top unit, they've generated more shots, more shot attempts, more goals with him off the top unit than on it. So kind of negates their advantage on special teams a little bit. So I would probably just go to Coleman Coronado Backlund. You know, Backlund and Coronado and Coleman will play, you know, at the high end. Some of the guys, a couple of guys might get to like 20 minutes, at the low end, like 17. Coleman has 28 shots in his last 10 games. So even though he doesn't get like prime power play minutes, he's still shooting quite a bit. 2.8 expected goals, 69 shot attempts since Christmas. So that line has been generating well enough offensively, and they get a really good matchup against the Anaheim top line. So probably the Backlund line, but I think this is going to be one of those situations where I just probably don't play them and hope that the chalk fails. It's kind of the way that I usually treat chalk Calgary. On the Anaheim side, you know, I don't have interest in the Terry line. As mentioned, as you mentioned, Dustin Wolf is in net. He's generally been really, really good this season. That Backlund line has been really good defensively. Kind of out on that. McTavish, Gauthier, and Fabry is a little interesting to me. 155 minutes since Christmas. Just under league average at 5-on-5. It sounds like a slap in the face, but it's honestly not that bad for the Anaheim Ducks. You know what I mean? Like, other than the top line, the rest of the lines really haven't done a whole lot this year. So being just under league average actually isn't that bad. You know, I guess they're playable if you're playing like Tampa Bay or something like that. I think rather than full stacking anything, I'd be more interested in one off Mason McTavish, one off Cutter Gauthier, one off Trevor Zegras, like those kinds of things rather than full stack a line. You know, if I'm playing like a 3-2-1 lineup or like a 4-3-1 or something like that, like having one of these guys as a one-off, I think is fine, but full stacking on the road against Dustin Wolf when your power play is just doing nothing, I'm just kind of out on that. So I think this is a game that I'm mostly just going to fade and pray it ends up like 3-1 and it does, you know, it's not a Blake Coleman hat trick.
Yeah, Pickles' hat trick would be bad for business for me, I believe. Detroit Red Wings with a 2.6 total heading into Edmonton. The Oilers have a 3.9. Edmonton wanting to have 3 lines. So they're going McDavid, Nugent Hopkins, Connor Brown, Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin, Hyman, Skinner, Henrique. Detroit going Larkin, Raymond, Casper, DeBrincat, Tarasenko, Copp. Now, there's a couple of question marks on the Edmonton side because Klingberg is in. Ekholm missed practice yesterday because he was sick, but he was at morning skate.
Yeah, so it looks like Ekholm's going to play. He'll be paired with Bouchard, and they're taking Troy Stetcher out to put Klingberg in.
Okay, so they're going to go 12-6, looks like.
Yeah, looks like.
I just don't want to play Connor Brown. It's a really good power play spot. So I think honestly, like my favorite 5-on-5 line would be Leon Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin, 16.9, same price as the top line, 3.5% compared to 11.5%. But at the same time, this is a really, really good power play matchup. So I think like I just go like McDavid, Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and make it expensive and get different and call it a day because it's a really good power play matchup. And their power play is back rolling since Hyman came back right around Christmas. So, again, like broken record, I'm going to focus on the power play guys for Edmonton. If you want a 5-on-5 stack, it would be the second line for me. On the Detroit side, I do have interest in that top line. I think Lucas Raymond has been a big beneficiary of the coaching change. He has been excellent since Todd McLellan has taken over. That top line is fully correlated at 15-3. Edmonton's generally good defensively, generally has a good penalty kill, but we've seen Edmonton goaltenders have meltdowns before, so I don't mind Detroit 1 in MME. Raymond 1-off I'd consider in any format. So my favorite thing in this game is some sort of Edmonton power play stack. Edmonton 2, Detroit 1, definitely playable.
Yeah, just to talk about the Oilers a little bit here, I'll talk about something that we were actually talking about in the Discord yesterday, and it was the Edmonton power play and what's gone on. Earlier in the season, they were just flat out bad. As Josh mentioned, since Zach Hyman came back, they've been a lot better. The top unit with Connor McDavid, because there were a few games where he was suspended, didn't play. The top unit for Edmonton at 5-on-4 since Hyman came back in early December, 77 shots per 60 minutes and 14 goals per 60 minutes. To put that into context, last season it was 71 shots and 14.1 goals per 60 minutes. So they're basically right back to where they were last year. The difference has been power play opportunities. Over the last 5 weeks, the Edmonton Oilers are at 2.2 power play opportunities per game. 26th in the league. They're drawing fewer power play opportunities than teams like Seattle and Vegas in that span. If you look at the full season, the Edmonton Oilers are 27th in the league by power play opportunities per game, less than teams like Anaheim, Philly, Vancouver. That's been the big difference for their upside production, is that they're not drawing many power plays. Like if you're only getting a couple power plays a game as opposed to what they got last season. Like last season, Edmonton, they weren't elite at drawing power plays, but they're getting about a half power play more per game over the course of the season. Like 40 extra power plays for this top unit means a lot. So drawing a lot fewer power play opportunities does matter. This is still a really good power play matchup. Now, Detroit's power play has gone a few games without giving up a goal against, Detroit's penalty kill has gone a few games without giving up a goal against. Now, one of those games is against Tampa, so full marks there. The other 3 games were against Philly, Montreal, and Los Angeles. Unless Laine scores, like the Montreal power play isn't really that dangerous. And then you have Philly and Los Angeles, who are like 2 of the bottom 3 power plays in the league. So like, I'm not buying into like the recent turnaround. Still think it's a really good power play matchup for Edmonton. I agree with you. I would probably do like McDavid, Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl. The problem with playing Hyman, I don't have a problem with playing Hyman specifically here tonight, because his price is a little bit more reflective of what he's done. But the problem is when he's down on the third line, because remember they did this like a month ago. When he's down on the third line, he plays like 15, 16 minutes, not 20 to 21. You know what I mean? So like, even though him and Skinner have actually been fine together this year at 5-on-5 in a depth role, even though Hyman's on the top power play unit, you probably need a goal and an assist or 2 goals or something like that from him, because getting a shot bonus playing 15, 16 minutes down on the third line is a lot to ask. So you need a multi-point game from him. I think I would probably just go like McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins or something like that, or just McDavid and Nugent Hopkins, like something along those lines. But yeah, I do like Edmonton as a really good power play matchup for them. On the Detroit side, that top line is a little interesting just because they have played so well since McClellan took over. Like with Marco Kasper there, they're up to 125 minutes, 3.4 expected goals, 73 shot attempts, 3.9 goals per 60. And Kasper is on the top power play unit now. So that that Detroit top line is 15,300. Larkin and Raymond are probably going to play 19 to 21 minutes. Kasper probably around 17 or so. So this is a perfectly correlated top line where 2 out of the 3 guys are going to play around 20 minutes, and they're 5.5% owned at 15,300. This is still the Edmonton Oilers. We have seen, and this is still John Klingberg's first game in well over a year. Like he had surgery, he had his hip surgery. I think it was 14 months ago. So like, what's he going to look like in his first game back? Like if he's bad, if he has a bad game, look at Drew Doughty last night. If he has a bad game, it's enough to cause a couple goals against by himself. So single entry, I don't know if I'm going to get to Detroit 1. But again, this is a perfectly correlated top line that's going to get a hefty amount of minutes, or at least 2 out of the 3 of them will, at 15,300. And they've been good both at 5-on-5 and on the power play. So I think there's merit to playing Detroit 1 here. It's the only line of theirs that I had an interest in, but obviously my interest is more on the Edmonton side.
Yeah, definitely an interesting game. I don't think I'm going to get to Detroit in single entry either, but they are definitely in consideration for me. Columbus Blue Jackets with a 2.6 total. Heading into Vegas, the Golden Knights have a 3.8 total. Vegas going Eichelstone, Barbashev. Sorry, I don't know what he wants. Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Olsen. Columbus going Marchenko, Voronkov, Fantilli, Ken Johnson, Sillinger, Van Riemsdyk. I don't have a ton of interest in Columbus here, unfortunately. It is our Columbus Blue Jackets, but you know, these Vegas lines generally have been decent. Vegas doesn't take many penalties at all. So if you happen to get Columbus 1 in MME, that's fine, but I'm out on them in single entry. My interest is on the Vegas side. Just give me 1 second. I think I know what he wants.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get to this. I will say there's a little interest for me on the Vegas or on the Columbus top line, because again, it's kind of that Detroit situation where this is a perfectly correlated top line, and they're not that expensive. Like, you know, this line was like in the 18K range at very recently, and now they're down to 16,800, 1.5% ownership. Not that Columbus is Dallas, but we just saw Dallas, put up 4 goals against them, and Dallas is missing like a third of their forwards. Wasn't that long ago wasn't that long ago that Vegas had St. Louis in town and gave up 4. They went to Chicago and gave up 5. Like, Vegas has not been a great defensive team this year. The goaltending, I think they missed Logan Thompson a little bit. I think it might be fair to say that. The Columbus top line, 2.8 expected goals, 3.1 actual goals since Monahan got hurt. Like, Fantilli and Marchenko are playing like 21, 22 minutes. So again, this is like the Detroit situation where you're going to get a perfectly correlated top line that's not in a great spot, but it's honestly not that bad. Like, the Vegas top line, 2.6 expected goals against per 60. So it's not even that bad of a matchup. I would have interest in Columbus one in a 20 max or higher. Single entry, it might be a little bit tough to get to Columbus just because when I look in that price range, we'll get to San Jose next. They're in play. When I look in that price range, like there are other lines, like I would probably rather play Detroit, but Columbus's top line has been good offensively. Vegas has not been a stalwart defensively. And I do think there's merit to playing them if you're playing a bunch of lineups here tonight, but that's the only situation. Single entry, I don't like. I don't think I'll be getting to them because, like I said, I'd probably rather play Detroit in that price range. On the Vegas side, like they've done nothing since Barbashev came back. 1.7 goals per 60 minutes since Barbashev returned. I think it's been 10 or 11 games now. Barbashev has 13 shots in his last 10 games. Remember, this line was scoring earlier in the season, but they were shooting 19%. They were due for some heavy regression, and it's finally hit. They're coming in with a ton of ownership, 19.6%. Like they're fine, but they are coming in with a lot of ownership. I would probably honestly rather just play Minnesota's top line. Like if I'm going to play a chalky line in that 19K range tonight, it's probably Minnesota against Montreal. So if you want to play Vegas 1, go ahead. I think there's a pivot in that price range. Vegas 2 is where my interest would be. Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Olofsson, Hurdle, and Dorofeyev on the top power play unit. The Vegas power play has been very, very good in this current iteration with Dorofeyev there. The second line, 3.6 goals per 60 and over 100 minutes together. Thomas Hurdle, 34 shots in his last 10 games. They're coming in with a little bit over-owned at 9.7%, but I think Vegas 2 is very much in play for me here tonight.
Yeah, I will echo those sentiments. Sorry. Hopefully this is the last basement show. A little frustrating. I apologize. But yeah, Vegas 2 would be my preferred line there. I definitely don't want to play Vegas 1 at that ownership. But yeah, let's get to the last game here. San Jose Sharks with a 2.6 total heading into Seattle. The Kraken have a 3.4 total. I've saved it the whole show. This game sucks. 3.4 total for Seattle is miserable. Schwartz, Beniers, Kakko at 15,000. Like, they're fine because of the Sharks, but like 15,000 is a little expensive. 6.6% is fine. I just don't like the price compared to how they've been playing recently. I wanted them to be cheaper. And it's not like I like the Stevenson line or the right line. So I think it'd be some kind of one-offs here, like a one-off Bjorkstrand, one-off McCann, one-off Beniers, something like that. I don't think I'm going to full stack anything on the Seattle side. On the Sharks side, it would be that Celebrini to Foley Eklund line. I'm probably going to have to go after this because he's losing his mind, but it would be Celebrini to Foley Eklund for me at 16,800. Yes, it's going to be Decordinet because they put Grubauer mercifully on waivers. But at 16,800 at 6%, I'd much rather play them than Seattle 1 at 6.6% at 15,000. Seattle doesn't have a very good penalty kill. They don't take a ton of penalties, but that Sharks line is fully correlated. So it would be the Celebrini line for me, one-offs on the Seattle side.
Yeah. Seattle has a 3.4 total. It's not like we can really just ignore it. And one thing I'll mention is that I hate to say it, but that Chandler Stevenson line's actually been kind of fine offensively. I do wonder how much of it is just Vince Dunn coming back. Like with Vince Dunn back, they actually, Seattle now actually has puck moving defensemen on two different pairs rather than just the Montour pair. So Stevenson, Bjorkstrand, and Burakovsky over 100 minutes together, 61 shot attempts, 2.9 expected goals, 3.5 actual goals per 60. They're going to probably avoid there goes Josh. They're probably going to avoid the Celebrini line because Schwartz and Beniers and Kako will go out against Celebrini a fair bit. And that means, the Granlund line, which is really bad defensively, the third line, which is even worse. It's pretty good matchups for that Stevenson line. And, Stevenson and Bjorkstrand are also on the top power play unit. So, of the Seattle lines, like, I'm not going to say don't play any of the Seattle lines because it's the 3.4 total at home against San Jose. Like, there's reasons to play all of them. But that Bjorkstrand-Burakovsky line is the cheapest, coming in with under 4% ownership. It has a higher top two stack percentage than the Shane Wright line, despite being $1,400 cheaper. 3.7% ownership. I really don't care on a slate this big. That's the line that I probably have interest in here. You want to play the Beniers line, like no issues with that. But Bjorkstrand, Stevenson, Burakovsky, I think is one of my favorite fillers on the board here tonight. On the San Jose side, there's always merit to playing Celebrini and Toffoli when they're playing with Eklund. 70 shot attempts, 2.7 expected goals, 4.6 actual goals per 60 in their 90 minutes together. Celebrini, 3.6 shots per game over his last 10 games. So he's really been getting involved offensively. Riker Evans out for Seattle. Joey Decourt is starting. That hurts. I don't mind playing San Jose's top line here. The thing is like they're in that price range with Columbus and Detroit that we mentioned earlier. Montreal, if you don't mind a little bit more ownership, is in that price range as well. Like, I just think there are other options in that price range. I would rather personally play here tonight. So no issue with the Celebrini line. It's the only line I have interest in on that side. I just think there are other lines in that price range that I would rather play. So I honestly think the Seattle line of Stevenson, Bjorkstrand, and Burakovsky is my favorite. I don't think you have to play all three. If you want just two-man Stevenson and Bjorkstrand, I think that's fine. But that's the line I have interest in this game. All right, let's get to defensemen. Top of the board for defensemen here tonight. Obviously, Zach Werenski is at the top at 8,600. At least he's not 9,800 or whatever it was anymore. He's at the top, 13.5 DK points for his projection, but he has a lower point per dollar projection than Evan Bouchard and Shea Theodore. So depending what you want to spend, I have no problem playing Werenski. It's one of those things, like, if Columbus does have a big game, if they have 4 or 5 goals here tonight, it feels pretty likely that Werenski is a big part of that. So, if you want to get away from what should be chalkier options like Bouchard, like Theodore, I think Werenski's fine, but Bouchard and Theodore do lead the way for point per dollar. So we should highlight them. In the mid price range, I don't mind Matthias Ekholm. It's a good matchup at home. Rasmus Anderson is up to 4,400 after his combo meal in the last game. I think he's still underpriced, especially in a really good matchup against Anaheim. Same thing for Mackenzie Weegar on the same blue line. Alex Pietrangelo at home. He's in a fine matchup. And Vince Dunn as well for Seattle. So there are a handful of guys in the mid-price range I don't mind playing. For the cheap guys, like those Islanders defensemen are going to have to probably play a lot of minutes again here tonight. So Adam Pelech certainly in play for the Islanders here. Alex Romanoff, he's more expensive with a lower projection, so I would probably just play Pelech, but obviously Tony DeAngelo in play for the Islanders. Scott Perunovich, he's a guy that we're big fans of here at, well, I shouldn't say at Stochastic. At least I'm a big fan of him. He was traded to the Islanders recently. His very first game, he played 18 minutes, 52 seconds for the Islanders. That's the most he's played in any game since November. So, he's Stoneman price 2,500. Flyers have Fedotov in net. So if you need a Stoneman price defenseman, don't mind him. Lane Hudson, I think him and Matheson and David Savard are going to have to play more minutes with Goalie out. It's a good matchup against a bad Minnesota penalty kill. So Lane Hudson, Noah Hannafin, 3,500 at home for Vegas in a good matchup, I think is fine as well. Dante Fabro, he's getting good minutes, but he would probably be a little bit below Neil Pionk for me from Winnipeg, who gets good minutes and is actually not that bad of a matchup against Boston. For the super cheap guys, I already mentioned Perunovich. He's Stone Min. John Klingberg coming in for Edmonton. I don't think Klingberg plays a ton of minutes. I think they'll still give a lot of minutes to Ekholm, Bouchard, and Nurse. But, maybe he plays like 16, 17 minutes. Pretty good home matchup. He's another guy you can play for Stone Min. Albert Johansson from Detroit. He's been playing pretty regularly, over 20 minutes on the second pair with Edmonton. He's under 3K as well if you need a guy down in that price range. And Louis Crevier for Chicago. He plays like 18, 19 minutes, and he's in a spot where he might have to block a lot of shots against Carolina. So those are the cheap defensemen I like. In net tonight, oh boy. Of all the goalie slates that we've had on this show, this is certainly one of them. Pyotr Kochetkov is at the top of the board right now. Now, I don't think Carolina has confirmed a goalie. I think Kochetkov goes. They're not going to try to overload Anderson too much. Kochetkov is fine. There's shutout equity against Chicago. I don't mind Connor Hellebuck, 7,800. Anytime he's kind of priced down is interesting to me. And we said earlier, Winnipeg has one big weakness is their penalty kill, and Boston's power play is horrific. So don't mind Connor Hellebuck, 7,800, 1.59 points per $1,000. So I certainly don't mind Hellebuck here tonight. Logan Thompson on the road against Ottawa. As long as Logan Thompson starts, he seems like a pretty good guy to turn to. I'll mention Dustin Wolf at home against Anaheim as well. He's projecting well in a good home matchup. Not super expensive. So Dustin Wolf, Logan Thompson, Connor Hellebuck, Pyotr Kochetkov would be the expensive guys. If you're looking to pay down a little bit, Jakub Dobeš for Montreal. He's at home against the Wild. Montreal has been giving up a lot of shots. That can lead to a lot of goals against for Dobeš. So, it could lead to 4 goals on 11 shots in the first period, and he's pulled. Also could lead to a big DFS night. So I will mention Dobeš. Whoever gets to start for Anaheim is certainly in play. Again, the Flames' power play has been worse with Kadri on the top unit, and they generally don't score a lot at 5-on-5 anyways, even though they do generate good shot volume. So I think whether it's Dostal, whether it's Gibson, either goalie is fine. So the 2 cheap goalies I would look at are Dobeš and Dostal. All right. I'm going to get out of here. We are TBD on the show for tomorrow, for Friday. I believe it's a 4-game slate. Last week, they kind of nuked the contest on Friday for a 4-game slate. We didn't have a show. If they do the same thing, we won't. If they have the same size contest that we have today, then we will. So we'll let everybody know on Twitter and Discord in the morning. My hat trick pick for tonight, I'm going to Edmonton. I'm going to an old stochastic favorite. I'm going to Mr. Victor Arvidsson for my hat trick pick here tonight. For Josh, he'll be back, obviously, for the next show. For myself, good luck tonight, everybody, and we'll see you when we see you.